the work of an Iowa-based organization bailing out Benji kind of helped spark this investigation. Can you tell me about that?
That resolution filed in King County Superior Court requires the company to pay the state $3.75 million with interest.
Bailing out Benji
regularly looks through these records of dogs' movement from state to state.
Bailing out Benji
played a key part in unraveling a nationwide puppy scheme.
Bailing out Benji,
an organization that's been working across the country to stop the pipeline of puppy mill breeders.
Bailing out Benji.
I will use my voice because they don't have one, and I will keep doing it until there are no more puppy mill dogs.
Welcome to this week's episode of Truth, Lies, and Puppy Mills. I'm Alexis, joined by my colleagues Mindi and Kristen today. And today's just kind of a conversation, or I guess a catch-up kind of thing. We've all been out and about. Mindi was gone in Indiana, and then both Kristen and Mindi were gone to Atlanta, Georgia for a conference. So we just thought that this episode would kind of be like a catch-up and a conversation about that side of bailing out Benji, like what the conferences were about, what our experiences are, I guess, just in general, some conversations. You guys get to tune in on our catch-up and learn a little behind the scenes of what we're seeing at conferences. So.
Yeah, the government shutdown kind of scared us a lot with our travels and everything.
Yeah.
Thankfully, everything was pretty smooth.
Yeah, we got out of Atlanta the day before they started restricting flights.
Yeah.
And then I traveled last week and didn't have any issues, so that was
nice.
A relief.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And I don't know if we've talked about it on the podcast at all, but the government shutdown actually affected the USDA.
Yes.
And inspectors stopped doing their work the first week of September,
and
they weren't even answering their phones based on conversations we had with people in the industry. So it's wild how much stops when the government decides to stop working.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing we tried to bring to people's attention in like a post when we posted about the quarterly, which was a little light because of the USDA being shut down as well with the government and inspectors not inspecting. Was that, that also means that like dogs aren't being looked after, like the regulating agency isn't able to regulate during this time. So a lot more gets affected during this government shutdown in regards to our work too. So we did see a little bit of a stall there.
But that's why community work matters more than just relying on the government and relying on laws and stuff, because like if that goes away, then what does that mean for everybody left over? But that's why our work kind of matters. And I think that the past few weeks of everything we've experienced shows us the positive side of our work mattering. We've had so many conversations with people in this work, with people in the industry who are seeing positive change and aren't scared necessarily to talk about that positive change.
Yeah, that was so we did a virtual conference a few weeks ago, and that was something that was really eye-opening to me, because we've been having these conversations. We've kind of been at the forefront of some of the more controversial messaging changes in this work, and have been kind of alone out there, right? And I think we went to a conference, what was that, in the spring? And people were you kind of got the feeling that people were like, we agree with you. Keep going. Yeah. It was just we're not ready to come alongside, but you're doing good work. And so that was like, oh, okay, that's cool. All right. So we're not alone, actually. And then this one the virtual one that we just did, there were people actually like being a little louder about like, no, we're seeing changes in this space. We're seeing these things and we're changing the narrative and pushing it back against it, and being a little more inclusive with who we allow to have a seat at the table. So that was very encouraging to see for me.
I echo that, because sometimes it's really hard working in the space that we are, and to appear to be deviating from how like a lot of the big organizations operate. But then when we get into these rooms like that virtual conference with other people that are working also in their communities that are maybe a little bit closer to like the grassroots that we are, closer to the situation, we realize that there are a lot more people thinking and speaking the same way, but because certain narratives have been pushed for so long and the conversations have been so hyper focused on these one thing, that like you're like, oh yeah, you do feel alone. So it did feel quite isolating, but it was quite uplifting to be in those conferences and to have like the breakout rooms with people that I've never spoken to, but to find that like, oh wow, we actually have a lot of like common things that we're saying and that we're wanting to see out of this industry. And it's not all just like pet store focused. Like they are trying to broaden their lens. That's one thing I enjoyed. Sir Oxford.
Yeah, if you're watching, Ox just walked in and he's 200 pounds of in the way always.
And if you're listening and wondering why it sounds like a wind tunnel, that's Ox breathing.
There you go. Good
And
boy.
Drew's like, good boy, Ox. And Moochie is like, I don't even know what
Where
that
do I
is.
sit?
Come on up, baby girl. I think too, again, I haven't been in this space, but I would imagine that older, like you talked about, like the bigger organizations kind of have this narrative or way of thinking or way of moving in the animal welfare world. And I imagine that either worked or made sense because everybody was kind of going with that. And it seems like now we're at a point where the boots on the ground people, so like the rescues and the shelters and the folks that are actually doing this every single day, are starting to realize like, yeah, that doesn't fit anymore. Like it served a purpose, but it doesn't work anymore. And so how do we need to look at this differently and approach it differently? And so that seems to be where I think, even a year ago, people maybe were feeling uncomfortable with that, but didn't know how to break free of it. Whereas now it seems like we're finding people that are more comfortable to say, yeah, that's not serving us anymore.
And I think that problem is messaging, because if you've said the same thing for so long, how do you change? And we're seeing that with like, say, rescues and shelters. When they get dogs from, I'm going to use National Mill as an example because we know them and work well with them. But when they get a bunch of dogs from the Midwest and then they go to the North, this just happened like last week. I saw it on Facebook, but those northern shelters now, at least the post that I saw, they weren't like, we rescued these dogs from puppy mills. Their post was very authentic. And it was like, hey, we partnered with the National Mill Dog Rescue to get dogs out of commercial dog breeding facilities. And now they're up here for adoption. They didn't put their own narrative on it. They didn't act like they were the ones rescuing these puppy mill dogs. You and I kind of saw how the sausage was made, so to speak. I know that's a weird thing to say, but like we spent with the Atlanta conference, we spent a whole week with Teresa.
Yeah.
And man, did we spend hours talking to her about rescuing and all of that. We saw her organizing this behind the scenes, and it's not always, and I won't give away her industry secrets by any means, but it's not always the 200 dogs getting rescued from a puppy mill getting shut down. Like very often it's her saying, hey, do you have any dogs that need placed right now? Do you have any dogs looking to retire? It's not 911. It's not urgent. Sometimes it is. But seeing that messaging carry from the work she's doing up to those other shelters and rescues, I think that's helpful. And it gives the public a better idea of what they're getting into, I think.
Yeah, that was very educational for me, just listening to Teresa tell stories. It opened up the work that she does and some of the questions I had around some of the work that organizations like that do. And I mean, say what you want, but they're very transparent. So that, talking about that change of messaging, I feel like they're not going to say something to be manipulative. They're just going to tell you, here's what it is. And so it's good to see that groups being careful with that narrative. And then, we also see groups that are not being careful with the narrative. So it is that just step by step, getting those changes. And it makes it easier, I think, for some of those organizations to take that scary first step to change the messaging when they see so many others that are doing it.
Right. And it goes, I mean, again, definitions. Like we even had like the term commercial breeder. One of our own volunteers, Shannon, I know you're listening. Hey, what's up? Her definition of commercial breeder was that means you sell to a pet store or online. And our definition of a commercial breeder is that means you're licensed as a commercial breeder, right? So we were taking it literally, and she was taking it based on how they sell. And because our messaging and our definitions were different, that could have caused a lot of frustrations and confusion based on the work we're doing and the work she's perceiving that we're doing.
Well, and to me, a commercial breeder would have nothing to do with licensing because I don't know. I mean, I do now, but like as somebody not in this world, I don't know what licensing stuff means. To me, a commercial breeder is someone who sells dogs commercially. So not like, ooh, my dog had a litter of dogs and I'm going to sell them to my friends and neighbors. But like I have a business and that business is selling dogs. To me, that's a commercial breeder, licensed or unlicensed. So, right, being cognizant that the words we use mean something different. And as we've seen, obviously, puppy mill, that's got a million different meanings depending on, I mean, everybody you talk to is going to have a different idea of what a puppy mill is. So yeah, maybe we need to toss those labels and be more specific in what we're actually talking about.
Yeah, I think clarifying like definitions, but also like everybody in this work, because there's a lot of us, like coming together and agreeing on the terms that we use so we don't continue to confuse advocates and the public. I think that's been kind of a hard part, but a nice thing about these conferences when we can all come together and talk about these things is that we do realize like, oh, there are different perspectives, and we're like, okay, so this is where the confusion's coming from, or this is where the misunderstanding is coming from. It's just my thought, I guess. Something that I did like, there was for the virtual conference we attended, Spark put on this presentation that was about like narratives, and like it essentially came down to like the words that we use, and like I guess it does come down to like intention behind them, but it is kind of a helpful thing to think about, like, hey, maybe we should be changing what our narratives are, or like how we are phrasing things. And it is nice to know that there are people that are coming together that do notice that like, hey, this isn't working, and maybe we should change how we're operating and how we're saying things.
And that's across the board. Like Hannah's been working on that with shelters and rescues, like not demonizing the person who can no longer afford to take care of their pet, right? Like taking a lot of the shame and blame away and focusing on the positives and not the negatives. Like that's a movement we've seen in the animal sheltering world for years now. Everyone is trying to skew more positive and less blame and shame. Our industry, the puppy mill specific industry, has not gone on to that messaging yet. And we're facing that now as our organization is trying to steer that ship, course correct this giant ship we're all on. We're getting pushback from people in our industry a little bit about that messaging change when everyone else is already on board. So the puppy mill groups are just a little slower to get there. And I think it is because of that messaging confusion. And again, when you're married to those slogans, it's really hard to shed that because so much of your identity is wrapped up and around this work. Speaking from experience, right? Like you do become your beliefs in your work so often. And so it's hard for people to separate that.
Well, and I think too, like shelters and rescues, I don't know, I'm just making this up, so I could be completely wrong, but they at least get to see victory. Whereas when you're doing puppy mill work, you're seeing the worst of the worst of the worst, and that's your focus. If you make it your focus, right? Like if you're only focusing on the worst of the worst, I can see how it's hard to change your narrative to not shame and blame. And I mean, that's what you're immersed in.
Our lens is cruelty. Like our perception is very real and very valid. And so the people working in this space with us, they see the worst of the worst all the time, which makes it really weird and scary and yucky when we say, hey, now we're seeing places that maybe aren't the worst. They're actually showing us how things can be done in a great way that is humane.
And your mindset the first time you went into a facility was with that cruelty mindset. You were expecting, like we start with expecting cruel and inhumane instead of expecting these people are doing what they're supposed to be doing in a humane way. Like when we're starting from a place of, I'm expecting you to be failing, then it is hard until you've seen it for yourself. And now I'm guessing when you go into places, you're not coming into it with that eye of, I'm expecting this to be a complete train wreck.
It's actually the opposite. I think I have higher standards now because we've seen some really good places that sometimes I walk in and I'm like, oh, why do you do it this way and not the way the person
This
this
could be
way
better.
is doing it?
Yeah.
But then we get to share that information.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's just, it all goes back to messaging, but also the threat of our work. And if we are acknowledging progress, there's a little bit of threat to the work that we've been working on.
Which I'll never understand. I don't understand why, if our goal is to end puppy mills and we are like, ooh, look, this is not a puppy mill, why is that a threat? That's a win.
Right.
But
Well, so the same time
never
your virtual conference was going on,
Mhm.
I was in Indiana, and the reason for my trip was because there was going to be a panel at Purdue University for all of the vet students. So this was like 300 vet students. I think it was everybody except for like the last year students.
Mhm.
And this panel happened last year too. So there were commercial dog breeders, commercial brokers, veterinarians, and someone from the AKC. When I posted on Facebook transparently that we did this really cool thing,
Mhm.
people were like, how dare you sit next to the AKC? How dare you have conversations with people that we perceive to be the enemy? And that kind of became a really big talking point. But people didn't understand that those conversations happened without us being there.
Yeah.
And the fact that they allowed us, someone like me, anyone from this space could have been sitting in my seat. But the fact that they made space for a puppy mill group to talk about our lens in our work, I thought was really important.
Yeah.
And then having our volunteers in the audience still hearing me push back on the things that others were saying or questions that students were asking. Like, I'm not a yes man, right?
Mhm.
None of us are yes men.
No.
We say exactly how we feel and what we've experienced. So that was also interesting. But it was that the messaging and the belief that the AKC is evil,
Mhm.
and that is prolific. I mean, we push that out there, not we, the colloquial, our industry pushes that out there, while at the same time on the local level, when we're trying to pass ordinances, we say, hey, go to the local AKC breeders, they're great.
Mhm.
So like quietly we tell city council members, hey, local AKC, don't buy from pet stores, buy from a local guy. But then nationally we're yelling at the AKC and saying how evil they are,
Mhm.
without remembering that every single person in this is an individual.
Yeah.
No one is like an industry. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. We've had a weird few weeks, I think, with conversations with how people perceive our work as opposed to what our work actually is.
Yeah.
I think too that whole concept of how dare you sit next to the AKC, again, personally, I don't see how, if my goal is to affect change in an industry, how I'm supposed to do that if I can't work within that industry. Like,
Mhm.
why would we ever give up that seat if it was offered to us to be in that space? And that's part of what I feel like through these conferences that we've been doing in the last few weeks, is seeing those doors open up more to bring people into the space that would have previously been excluded.
Yeah.
So you being invited into a space where we have historically been excluded, and then others coming into our space where they have historically been excluded. I don't see how you affect real change without having those conversations and being at those tables and
learn from each other.
Right.
Yeah. I do echo that, because it's like we're a research-based organization, and like how I keep presenting it to like volunteers and the people, it's like it would be silly for us not to be in these spaces, not to learn like
feels
about these things.
irresponsible.
It feels irresponsible because we're talking like we have authority on this conversation, but yet we're leaving out all of these different ways that we could be acquiring more knowledge about it, to speak better to people, to give them better, more effective like strategies. So it's like, I don't know, I do try to talk to people and be like, well, it is silly for us not to go and learn and like gather as much information as we can. Like, people are trusting us as a resource, and if we're only like going in with half a deck or only giving them certain information because that drives a certain narrative, like that's not creating the informed consumer or advocate that we want. Like,
It's like when the government or whomever tries to come in and tell you how to run your classroom as a teacher. That person has never been inside of a classroom. They've never run a school.
Yeah.
Yet they are trying to tell you from like their ivory tower up top how to do it. That doesn't work, right? You have to know how it works from the inside. And I just think that this future is exciting. Like, we had a hint that we flat out say people aren't thrilled with our work. We don't really say we don't care. Like, we talk a lot with each other. Like, we don't care that people aren't thrilled with the work
Mhm.
we're doing, because we're not. Like, I think it's exciting, and
Mhm.
I love meeting new people
Mhm.
and learning from
And
different
some
perspectives.
people are thrilled. And
Yeah.
like, I've always had the mindset, like, for me personally, like, I'm not for everybody. I'm a very specific personality type.
Yeah.
Some people are just not going to vibe. That's fine. That's fine. There's other people out there.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of the same, like, we're not for everybody, but if you're on board with this, if you're excited about this, then come along. Like,
Right.
we're
Yeah.
going cool places and we're doing cool things, and you
Mhm.
don't have to. Nobody's going to make you come with.
No.
Right.
But it's kind of cool when you start like dipping your toe in, and then you look around, and you're like, oh, you're here too. Like, oh my gosh, like, this is so
It is.
exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, you don't have to agree. None of us agree with 100% of what anyone is doing, right?
Mhm.
Like, we all have our own perception, but you can still come to the table and have fun conversations where you're challenging how everyone is thinking about the world.
Yeah.
That's a point of being an adult, I think, is having those like Socratic debates to keep, I don't know, moving the industry and yourself as a human.
Yeah. And like you were saying earlier, Alexis, like, if we're not talking to those people,
Mhm.
we're making stuff up. Like,
Mhm.
it's the same with the data. Like, if we're not looking at the data that we look at, we're just going to make assumptions based on what we feel
Yeah.
or what we think is happening. But
Mhm.
we're looking at actual data and saying, oh, here's actually what's happening. And it's the same with having conversations. We can choose to block out breeders and brokers and pet stores and everyone else. But then when we talk about the work they're doing, we're just making things up based on what it seems like is really happening.
Yeah.
And that's not what we do.
No. No.
I was talking to our volunteer Tracy over the weekend, and she said that we're kind of like the doctors during COVID a little bit,
Mhm.
in the sense that they were working with the knowledge as they knew it.
Hmm.
And the knowledge kept evolving, and they
Mhm.
kept going and they kept going. And then the public was getting mad at them
Mhm.
because the public was like, well, what do you mean?
You keep
Last week you
changing."
said this, right? And it's like, so 15 years ago when Bailing Out Benji was founded, I didn't know that there wasn't a layer of research that had already been done on this industry.
Mhm.
I was starting from Mindi Callison on the sidewalk and building my own research, right?
Mhm.
As we began talking with other people in the industry, and I mean veterinarians and national humane, quote unquote, pet store chains, like all of these big industries,
Mhm.
everyone talks about how there was a lack of data and a lack of research. And as we talked to our colleagues in the space, we started realizing no one was investing in the research because everyone was focused on the mission.
Mhm.
So we were like, this is our strong suit. We will lean in and we will keep going with research. And everyone loved it. Everyone was so excited that someone was focusing on research and they got to use it and point to it.
Mhm.
Until that research didn't support every single thing everyone was working on.
Mhm.
And so, again, when we said, hey, this one Amish breeder is not a puppy mill, and the world exploded, it wasn't because people didn't necessarily not trust us. It was because they had to sit with those weird feelings of, now I have to evolve my way of thinking.
Mhm.
And I think that that's kind of where we are too. It's just making people sit in that uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Which this is a hard transition for people. But it's okay to evolve with new information, you know, like, and that is why we're here. And it is always changing, but please trust us to at least report on it, and that it is research based. And I know that's what we're moving from. I think that's also hard when there is a lot of misinformation and data that isn't actually based in true research or data, that we have been seeing a little bit of pushback, because that's been just like what people have regurgitated for so long, and just this is our talking point, and this is what we bring to our council. So then when we actually put real data into there, they're like, but wait, this doesn't fit that narrative. But that narrative has been going on for so long. There is pushback. It is uncomfortable because you're like, well, this is different, and that doesn't exactly fit what's been said.
Right. But what does that say about our industry if we're noticing the commercial dog breeding world is evolving?
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not we agree with its existence,
Mm-hmm.
there are breeders within it that are evolving. There are brokers in it and pet stores. All of these different things exist on a spectrum, and they're trying to evolve. But our industry isn't. Like, us as puppy mill advocates, we are not interested in evolving. We want to use that same 10,000 number. We want to go forward on the path as we see success. And the minute the minute we kind of deviate a little bit, it is that uncomfortable feeling, but it is the exciting feeling for us. And I want to say that loudly. Like, we are so excited about the work we're doing that we kind of giggle a lot about how much we know it can frustrate others sometimes. Like, I know that's silly, but we also see how we're challenging our own industry. So as much as we're forcing the quote unquote puppy mills to change, we are also forcing the quote unquote puppy mill groups to change. So it's great.
Yeah, and I think it's a perspective, like, we like to be hopeful and optimistic. And so when we see a little bit of change, we're going to go on to the positive side and be like, look, a little bit of change. Whereas other groups are going to say, but look at all of this that hasn't changed. And it's like, yes, that exists and that's there, but we're going to follow this light of like, we're actually seeing some change. And so we're going to lean into that, because much like in our industry, same thing with breeders and brokers and all of these other people, some of them will never change. They will never change their mindset. They will never change the way they do business. Those are not our people.
Those are the people we're trying.
These over here who are, right, we want them to go away. But these people who are willing to change and grow and learn and have conversations, that's what we're going to lean into. And so, there are groups who are going to focus all of their attention on that very last pet store. That's you. Do that. We're not doing that. We're focusing on over here. And we've got, if you're never going to change, then here's our plan of action for you. And you're willing to come to the table and have conversations, we have a plan of action for you as well.
Right. And again, there's so many different things that could be focused on that we don't all have to throw all of our eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
And so people are like, wow, I say people, it's like a handful. Why is bailing out Benji stopped putting as much of a focus on pet stores? And it's like, we're still the only ones researching pet stores. I don't know why people think we're not.
We're the only ones that get full connections, not just certain pet stores.
Right. Like, we're looking at the whole industry.
But in the reality, the percentage of pet stores versus the percentage of breeders and online sellers. So we're still looking at pet stores, but it's not weighted as heavily as online sellers, because there simply aren't as many as there are online sellers. So it's proportional to the problem.
Yeah.
So yes, pet stores are still a problem, but also there's a bigger problem. You're going to hear us talk about that more, because that's where more of our efforts are going.
If the research is leading us somewhere, we have to follow it. And that's, I think, what some people have had a hard time with. And what we learned too from the conference was that like only 2% of the puppies sold in the United States come from pet stores.
We haven't confirmed that.
Not
that
confirmed.
Was reported.
That was from another organization, but that's the number that's out there. And if we're working with that assumption, which already kind of aligns with data that we've been seeing, which was a couple 100,000 puppies get sold to pet stores is what we've tracked.
I think it was like 130,000 a year.
Yeah, it's not a lot. But then we go onto certain websites and we see like 80,000 puppies on a single website, and like to us, like that's more than like many of the pet stores out there like sell in a single year. Like it's wild. So like
from a non-research perspective, 138,000 sounds like a lot of dogs, and to think that that's potentially 2%. That's
again
insane.
When we talk about the 2% too, we don't know how other people come up with these numbers.
Yeah.
Like we see stuff. We
know
saw
it's
another
small.
And we saw another group kind of say like there are fewer puppies being produced now than before, and it's like even when you're looking at those numbers, it's like a screenshot in time or snapshot in time. It's not necessarily like indicative of the whole.
Because they used USDA, and USDA only takes account of the time that the inspector was there. And even at that, not everybody is inspected in a year. The USDA inspects from 2 to 3 years, everybody licensed. So that's a single snapshot. Like it's going to fluctuate year to year. And then you can't even tell, like, because you're telling how many puppies are at that single time when that inspector was there, but not the full count that they've had throughout the year. Like that's private paperwork we don't get to see. So we're like, well, how do you get these numbers? I will say, 2%. Still don't know how, but that is the number that's out there that we're seeing, and aligns kind of with the data that we're seeing when we track imports into pet stores in their states. So I don't know.
I think one of the most impactful things in that virtual thing that we were on, speaking of the percentages, was that the pie chart of where pets come from, and like the biggest slice was unknown. Like that was like, oh, yep, that's that's our slice.
Yeah, that's what we want to figure out too. What is the biggest outlet right now? And that's what the online stuff has been, and so great to dive into, because we're like, oh wow, guys, we need to really broaden our lens, because it's not just pet stores out there that like need to be looked at.
And instead of seeing it as like a threat, people should see this as like a huge bonus, a relief. Like,
Yeah.
if 100% of all puppy mill advocates are only focusing on pet stores, that leaves a lot to be, I don't know, curious about, right?
Yeah.
So if we're just minorly looking at the online stuff, and I say minor because it is the wild,
It's
wild west.
massive.
And although we think we're doing a ton of work online, it is still just a drop in the bucket. But that should be exciting for people, because now we are exposing even more of the puppy mill world. But instead, that threat of, no, but we should all be hyper focused on this one thing, that's not how you make change. And so I think there's room for all of it. And it's not negating other people's work, but don't negate ours in the process, right? Like, we're doing really cool and big things.
Yeah. And we have data to say, hey, this is what we're happening.
But yeah, overall, that conference was great. The feedback, I mean, truly, it just felt like people could talk in the open about breeding in a way that has never been acceptable before.
Yeah. We had a pet store owner, also a breeder, I think, who was in one of my breakout sessions towards the very end of the thing. And that was their reflection, was that like they did not expect to be welcomed into the space. They expected to kind of stay a little anonymous and stay out from, off anyone's radar, and were very surprised by how safe they felt speaking in breakout rooms, and that people were open to listening. And so that was, again, that's the kind of stuff for me personally. That's where it's at. I know some people have that. Why would you talk to somebody like that? Why would you be able to? That's not my mindset. I am led by curiosity and connection, and I want to meet people. I want to talk to people. I want to hear their stories and understand where they're coming from. So that was really good to hear. Having entered this space and being so caught off guard by how, what's the word?
Polarized?
Standoffish would be nice. Polarized, aggressive, like attacking. Like it's. I have seen some troubling things between animal welfare groups, and so to now be about a year into this and have someone, a pet store owner, be on a conference with rescues and shelters and animal advocates and say, I feel safe. I feel like people wanted to hear what I had to say. Like, to me, that's progress. Some people will see that as wrong, but
can I just say for our listeners, the pet store owner was not from a Petland store.
No, it wasn't.
So...
It was a small store, and I don't want to get the story wrong, but I feel like they were getting out of the store to focus on breeding, or vice versa. But I don't. Yeah, it was a small.
Thing.
Yeah, I think, I don't know.
Yeah, but to your point about like them feeling comfortable, like I don't necessarily care if a pet store owner feels comfortable as an industry. I feel that we should all make sure everybody feels comfortable in the conversations we're having.
Right.
And if we're bringing people to the table, it is to make sure that they feel comfortable and have conversations, because that's how you grow. And I know that makes people uncomfortable just to say it out loud, but it's okay to sit across the table from someone who you have nothing in common with and not scream at each other. And like, that is powerful.
I know there were people on that conference who don't agree, who are not comfortable with any of this. They don't want a pet store owner or a broker being in their discussion group or in their conference at all, like even at the table. But those people sat quietly, in my experience at least, in the breakout rooms I was in. They sat quietly and they listened. And hopefully, I'm hoping that they were listening with an open heart and an open mind. But there wasn't the attacks or the criticism or that negative outlook. It was, I've been around long enough now where I kind of know some of the players, and I'd be like, oh, I think that this person is not loving this conversation. Yeah. But they were there and they were listening and they were present, and camera was on and they were engaged, and And some people did push back a little bit and ask questions and be like, yeah, that's not been my experience, or I don't. It was all done with respect and with a spirit of curiosity. So that's all we ask.
And what a great reflection of like our humanity, right? Like that rescues and shelters could join this call and not have pitchforks and not be screaming. Like, yeah, we can have people who aren't in the same industry we are, and we're not attacking them. I think that's really important.
Yeah.
It is typically a small group of noisy, right? In any, you can look at any spectrum of our work or our world right now, and it's usually a small group of people who are mad, and they're the loudest ones. So, but I personally love walking into a situation knowing that people don't trust me, don't like me, don't like my work. And then after they get to know us and everything we do, they do like us. And I know they're walking away going, damn it, I do like her. Like, that is fun for me. And I love leaning into that, whether I'm working with rescue groups who are curious about our work or breeders who are curious about our work. And that came up last week. One of our volunteers had asked, like, aren't we on the same side? Shouldn't we all be on the same side? And what they meant was us, rescues, shelters, advocacy groups, we're on the same side.
And then breeders, brokers, pet stores are on the other side.
And so my answer is the same thing we've been saying every episode of this podcast. Bailing Out Benji doesn't believe in sides anymore.
Yeah.
We are on the side of dogs. And if it is good for dogs, then we are going to lean into that, and that is our side. And if we can bring more people to the table, then we are getting away from sides. And that's how we're going to keep growing, I think, as an industry.
Yeah, I think we've definitely figured out that collaboration seems to be a bit more effective than opposition. Like, it doesn't always have to be all or nothing. There is room for compromise and to move this industry forward, as long as we're willing to come in with open minds and open hearts and open conversation, even with people that you don't agree with. It's just, I think, a little bit more of what the world needs right now.
I mean, and think about it, like, just the root of it. If you look at like politics, people are compromising. Well, sometimes they're compromising on our values, but either way, like, you have to compromise to get things done. It is very rarely a clean, quote unquote, win for someone. And if our industry is so focused on win or loss, they can't acknowledge progress in the middle, because they want the clean win and that clean loss for someone else. And I like that we're in that uncomfortable gray area where it's like, no, progress is what matters. Wins come and go. Wins are like little teeny tiny battles, but progress for the dogs is lasting. And earlier you said values. We are working on values change and how important that is. Do you want to like bring that back a little bit?
Yeah, I guess. Well, it goes into a book we're reading that we've decided it's been introduced to us a year ago, is Beyond Cages, if anybody's interested. But it really does focus a lot on like how like punishment legislation is used a lot, but what it really comes down to is like when we're trying to change values, that's not exactly the best effect, because like you had stated too, like we're punishing instances of like puppy mills or like I don't know,
when you put a spotlight on one bad inspection report and kind of blow that up as the norm instead of an example.
So it's like it's just a certain instance that you're focusing on, and it's not really getting down to like the value changes that we need for progress. But collaborating and having conversations really gets to the root of things. Like, legislation doesn't change values, it changes procedures. But if you're not really getting to the heart of the issue, I guess I don't know if that's going where you wanted it to go, but to change values, it's not just legislation, or it's not just like punishing like who we assume to be bad actors or given situations or not. It's really getting to the root of like the way people are feeling about something. And so like collaborating with people and talking and changing minds, rather than just a blanket like this is how things should be done and like forcing change that way. It's like changing the industry within seems more progress and more value changes that way.
I don't think you can force change, right? Like you can force compliance, sort of, but that's not change. That's someone doing it because they have to, or finding a way around it, which I think is what we have seen a lot with the forced change, is like okay, you can pass a law. I'm going to find a way around it. I'm going to find the loophole. I'm going to operate outside of that law. There's not enough resources to enforce it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not, the force doesn't lead to the change that you want. Collaboration is the only way we're going to get to.
If we can talk together, establish procedures that we agree on and say, hey, this is beneficial for animals, this is beneficial for the consumers as well, like, that's what we're trying to work towards. Industry change, because it's not lasting.
And another book that we love, Collaborating with the Enemy, makes a really great point that a lot of times when we think about collaboration, the goal is that we all have to agree. We all have to get on the same page. And that book makes a really great point that that's not collaboration.
No.
You do not have to all be on the same page. You have to get to a place where you can all move forward, but you don't all have to be in agreement. That's not the goal.
Right. And there are just things like, again, us talking to dog breeders, there are going to be things that we never understand because we are not dog breeders. And there are going to be things that we don't agree with because of that alone. And that's okay. But we can still look at humane care, and that's what we're focused on. Right. And so, it's across the world, collaboration and communication can solve problems. And it can solve wars. And if you can solve wars with conversation, damn it, these are dogs. How can we
Surely,
not fix this?
Animal advocates can behave as well as leaders.
But the trickle down conversations that have happened since I've been a part of this, and I've been unfortunately, I pushed a lot of those harmful stereotypes and conversations, but we just have to have an enemy. And when you have a boogeyman, when you have an enemy, you feel like you can put all of your anger and direct it at something. But that is very short term. Those are short term wins, short term fixes. We know, like, again, ordinances. Most of the ordinances that have been passed have been preventative, right? So they're not necessarily shutting down a puppy mill in town or even shutting down a pet store in town. And so it's like, when that's been our measure of success and those conversations, like, slowing down and re-looking at it's just uncomfortable for people, but I don't know.
Yeah, if the win is passing a certain piece of legislation, the true measure is, okay, how many lives did that legislation affect? And if it's like none, then is it really a win? Or if it's like a few, then is it a win? Versus where else can we focus to actually be making change in the industry that we're doing, versus chalking up a win that's not really changing anything in the industry.
I think we should be looking at like cause and effects too. We don't just pass things, we should also be analyzing the effect. And that is something why we have slowed down, because we're realizing as we're analyzing the effects afterwards, we're like, well, if the intention is to end puppy mills and then legislation is being passed that don't exactly make it back to those puppy mills or address the puppy mills, the things that are of concern, like, is that really the most effective thing for us to be doing? Like, is there something else that we could be doing? So it's just, I don't know, opening up these conversations, definitely talking more with the industry too, of like, if everybody can address all of these issues at the same level, like, we can get so much accomplished. We may be collaborating with people that like we never thought we'd collaborate with, or having conversations we never thought we would, but it does seem a bit more effective than this like tugging game. It's this tug of war game, because like it's the industry versus animal advocates, and like you win some here and you win some here, and it's like, okay, but like there's so much we could be doing in the middle that could be progressing it more, rather than this pull and tug and you get more over here and you get more over here sometimes.
And then the dogs are lost in the middle. And then also the consumer. And every single step of the way, the consumer has been left out of the conversation.
They are clueless. They have no idea any of these conversations are even happening.
Like, it's been fun having your perspective too, because you're like, no one thinks about that out there, because we're in the animal welfare field.
Everybody thinks this, and I'm like, no, they don't.
So
not that I speak for like Joe America, but like,
no, but
when you've been in this for as long as you all have, like that's
I'm in an echo chamber, and I think that everyone, right? Like I said on our call, man, wouldn't you want your puppy's mom if a breeder called you and said, hey, your mom's retired? Like, wouldn't you want your mom's, like, you're your puppy's mom, aunt, grandma, whatever that looked like.
Yeah.
And I said, everyone would want that. And you're
Nobody
like,
would pass that up. And I'm like, no, everyone's gonna be like, no, I only have one dog. That's fine. I do not want another dog. Thank you very much. I don't care who that dog's related to. People don't think of family lines with their pets. I mean, for the most part, some people do. Some people that are, into the purebred, whatever, I want to know who the mom and dad are, and I want to know their pedigrees and all this stuff. But the average, like I said this morning, and pardon me if this is insensitive, there's a lot of people getting dogs to shut their kids up, right? It's like the kids keep yapping that they want a puppy. Christmas is coming. Let's get them the stupid dog and shut them up.
Yeah. Right.
And teach them responsibility, because they're going to walk the dog and they're going to clean up after the dog, and they're not. In 6 months, you've got a family dog, and congratulations, it's all of yours now.
Yeah, Dad actually does like the dog after all.
Yeah, and so when somebody is like, oh, you want their mom? They're like, no, absolutely not. I didn't want this one. I just got it for my kids.
Right.
So yeah, it's just that, I don't know, that perspective. It was the same, like truly coming into this world from the mental health world. I think is why it's so jarring, because at least where I was in the mental health world, the people that I worked with and that I went to conferences with, and that I just, like, mental health was a priority for them. Like, well-being was a priority. And so you treated each other a certain way, and you talked to each other a certain way, and you carried yourself a certain way. And so to me, I assume that's how people act. So yeah, it's that same, like, it's not that you're in an echo chamber. It's just, it's the world that you live in. Like, your job is so much of your perspective on life. And so, yeah,
and I think we don't talk about it enough, but our world is also like a subsect of politics. Like, it's not just us trying to help dogs. There are so many political overtones with everything we're doing that it makes people lose their minds a little bit and forget that, like, also bailing out Benji isn't just a data point. We are 4 people in an office that are trying our hardest and doing our darndest to make a positive impact. Just because what we're saying doesn't fit somebody else's political agenda doesn't mean we're evil or wrong or anything. But our work, the work of advocates, like, we are kind of used as political pawns sometimes. And while we might be focused on dogs and humane welfare and all of that, it gets misconstrued and confused for something more nefarious, just because the overtone is politics.
Well, and we have demonized politics. I mean, rightfully so in some way, but politics is what makes society work. That's politics. Politics are stop signs, and politics are dog licensing laws, and politics are, that's politics. So we have the politics that we're all very tired of, but at its core, politics are like this. These are the rules and the systems that make society work. So when people are like, I hate politics, I don't do politics, like, you can't not, nothing is apolitical. Right. Everything is politics. So it's gotta be. I mean, it's the water that we swim in.
But reminding people that sometimes the way others react or the way people use data or all of that can be a manipulation of the politics, right? It's not necessarily how we see it. It's not necessarily how someone would see it rationally. A lot of our work is viewed through the lens of policy, and that makes it either threatening or not either way.
I was thinking earlier, I've a couple of times in our conversation today, right now, I keep thinking, like, am I going to bring this up? I'm like, don't even bring it up. And then it just keeps coming back to my brain. But earlier, when you were talking about, like, you came into this assuming that there was data underlying all of this, and then you realized there wasn't. And when we started focusing on data, people loved it. And my brain was like, well, if people were so excited about the data, why weren't they doing the data? And it's because the data is not sexy.
No.
Right? The messaging, the emotional side of it is what brings you supporters and funding. And it brings those troops who are willing to hit the ground and go because they're operating from a place of feeling and emotion. And data is just boring and nerdy. And sometimes it goes places you don't want it to go, and you can't deny it because it's data. And so I'm like, well, of course, they're like, yay, somebody's doing the data, because now we don't have to do it and have that dry, gross, but we can use their data.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of like my mid-podcast fundraising pitch. Like, other groups don't want to do the data because the data is not sexy, and people are not drawn. Some people are drawn to the data.
I think data's sexy, but I get it.
Right.
I get it.
Right. And we have a strong group of supporters who find our data very sexy.
Yeah.
But not like some of the other groups that have a lot more.
No.
Because that when you can be a little more, I don't want to say manipulative necessarily, because I don't want to assume people's intentions.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's the intention for some folks. But when you can tell a story,
Mhm.
you can bring in a lot more of that emotion and passion, and fuel some of that like movement. But when that movement isn't fixing the thing that your mission is, then like what's the point of that movement if you're just here to have fans? So
And I mean, it kind of goes back to that, like when you have one boogeyman, when you have one example or 100 examples of a bad person or bad operations, we'll say it that way, you lose sight of the spectrum and you're hyper focused on that little bit. And then you get the masses celebrating things where like we see some cases where it's like, oh, well, that's an 80-year-old woman with mental health issues. Does she need 100 charges against her? Because that we perceive her to be a part of a larger boogeyman scheme, right? It's just like when you take a second and look at the impact of our work, are we hurting individual people or are we helping dogs? Like where does that spectrum fall? And I'm really proud of the work we're doing and where we're finding our niche and we're finding our people.
Yeah. And there are people, I mean, we see groups who will post the ugly and the kind of sensationalized, and they get great response. But when we post the positive, we get great responses to that as well. So again, I think it is about, finding your people, and do you want to chase the positive or keep feeding off of the negative? And we will let the negative fuel our chase for the positive, but we're not gonna sensationalize the
Don't get it
negative or
twisted.
villainize.
Like Alexis and I work on spite. Like truly.
Yeah.
The more people are like, should you? We're like, we're gonna show you exactly why you should. And we lean way in. So spite fuels us, anger fuels us. But it's because that's who we are as people.
It is,
but we don't put that anger and spite onto others. Like we use it as fuel. We don't use it as ignition to light someone else on fire.
Right.
Like, that's
your
job.
anger and your spite are not directed towards individuals. It's towards a broken system. And that to me is a big difference, that we don't want to attack individuals. We want to attack the systems behind it.
And it does. We don't have to keep going on and on, but it seems like more people, the more we explain rationally, this is what we're doing, the more groups are like, yes. We went to the conference in Atlanta. Cole from Arkansas was like, he's in Arkansas with a state with no breeding regulations outside of whoever might need a USDA license. And he flat out was like, I would love it if a breeder in my community came and said like, hey, I'm having a hard time. How can you help me? How can I'm struggling. How can we work together? And he was like, it would be way easier for me if a breeder said, I'm going out of business and I want to start downsizing now, instead of I have 50 I'm dumping on you. And how can shelters and rescues kind of have conversations with breeders in their community? I don't know. It was really cool to see like someone in southern Arkansas or in northern Arkansas, excuse me, who has so many pets in his shelter. He says he loses money on every adoption because people don't want to pay adoption fees, especially in his community, especially compared to how much vet work they put in on those dogs. So they're losing money every time. And he's not mad at the work we're doing because he's not seeing it as tit for tat or whatever. Like we're not telling people to run out and buy. But he's like, yeah, if I could have communications and build trust in my community, that would help me long term.
Yeah, that was a big thing for him. And then some other rescue folks that I've talked to in this space, where talking about the importance of having that open table, because the breeder has to trust you to make that ask, to say, hey, I'm struggling, I need to downsize, or I'm getting out of business, or whatever. If they see you as the enemy, they're never going to approach you. They're going to go dump those dogs out in the country. And that is, as a shelter person, he does not want that. That's against what he's trying to do. So it's in his benefit to forge those relationships with these people, even if he doesn't agree with them. He needs to forge those relationships and set that aside.
And on the flip side, what happens if breeders start helping rescues and shelters, right? Like right now, it's not okay for a shelter to take money from a pet store or take money from a breeder or a broker. Like they would be crucified. But if we're trying to build a world that's better for animals, shouldn't there be a space where the people that we perceive as creating the problem, shouldn't we make space for them to help fix it?
Mm-hmm.
And so in those conversations with Cole, we're saying like, yeah, what if the breeder needs him and yada, yada, yada. Like maybe also Cole needs help down there. He's in rural Arkansas. Can you imagine if a shelter, if a breeder in that community was like, hey, I'd like to help you redo your kennels? That only helps the dogs, but he would be perceived as the enemy for accepting money from a breeding operation, right? And so it's like, who are we willing to accept help from? And in what instances is that appropriate?
Yeah, and who do we need to justify our actions to? So in that scenario, if he's like, sure, I'll take this money to and people are going to come at him, like, who are his stakeholders? Who matters? Because there's going to be a lot of voices that are against it, and that for every organization is determining who are the voices we need to be listening to, who are the ones that matter, because there's always going to be people who are like, I don't like that. That's fine. You don't have to do it.
Right. And in our conversations, through our field research, like a lot of the breeders are asking how to give back. And my answer is pet food pantries. Find a food pantry in your state and start loading it up with pet food, because that is an easy way to help and it's anonymous. And I think that sometimes people lean into press releases because they want that pat on the back, and that's where a lot of hurt feelings fall. But man, like they want to help. And if we can keep directing them places to help in their communities, it's a good thing. But can you imagine if they were helping us revamp our sheltering systems, revamp those pounds that are in rural communities? Like there are people willing to help. We just have to make space for that.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's a rabbit hole we want to go down, but another thing I'm hearing in some of these rooms is people like from the rescue shelter community saying like the breeder dogs, that's not what our shelter is full of. So for a rescue or a shelter to be like, ooh, the breeders are the enemy, like that's not what we're not getting those dogs in the shelter. That's not why we're overcrowded. Is again kind of reframing that narrative of why is it us versus them? Why is the breeder the enemy of the shelter? When it's not. And I think the perception there is if the breeder wasn't breeding the golden doodle, then somebody would go to the shelter and get one of those dogs. But I think the shelter people understand that's not a reality.
No, there are some people that are never going to adopt, and
I think
still gotta talk to them.
That's the genesis of the sea change is the people on the ground working in the shelters, the rescues, understand that this narrative is not what's happening. So like I hear the message you're saying, that's not what I see every day in my shelter. I don't see like this person who just bought that golden doodle was not going to come here and get one of my dogs that's in the shelter. Like that's not the same person.
And that goes back to the messaging group that you were all a part of with the other puppy mill organizations in this space. At the beginning, it seemed like they got into it. We were there to talk about messaging and changing our messaging for the public. And so many of them were like, how do we convert people who buy into people who adopt? And it's like, the conversion isn't working. Like we've converted a lot of people. And I think there will always be people who adopt and buy. But it is very rare that you find someone who will only buy and then you convince them to adopt. And I think that's where also frustrations lie. We want to convert instead of acknowledge those people are going to do what they want, and we have to give them the guardrails and the tools to do as little harm as possible.
Yep, I agree. Meeting people where they are instead of trying to force them to be what we want them to be. It's not going to work. It hasn't worked.
Stalls progress.
Right.
That's our only method is conversion. Like we're not going to get very far. We haven't gotten as far as we probably would like if that's been our only tactic. So.
But seriously, 2026, like more people are on board than ever. And I think next year we're just going to have even more room for collaboration. I think we're going to see a lot more ways that the pet industry and the rescue industry are working together, and we're going to be driving that change. I am excited to be on the forefront of that, and we'll just see what happens, I guess. So, but yeah, fundraising pitch, keep supporting our work.
Yeah.
We are really the ones who are doing it.
Yeah.
The work looks different depending on the organization that you're in,
Mhm.
but we're doing a lot of good things. So keep giving back and telling the good word
Mhm.
to anyone you talk to.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for sitting with us. We will catch you next time, I guess. Bye.